Welcome everybody to the latest and possibly greatest installation of the eye-opening, innovating, groundbreaking, student-led podcast that is Learning Beyond Lectures, the EdTech Talks. I am your host, backed by very popular demand, Sam Mahon, Glasnev's greatest. But enough about me. Although I'm very interested, the man beside me is much more interesting. He's done a lot of very special things. Our topic today is all about digital transformation, but through a very particular lens. We are looking at airport management, and beside me, I've probably the best person to have in for this. I don't think there's anyone, with more knowledge on this. So beside me here is Michael Martin, the Senior Vice President of DAA International and co-founder, I'm led to believe, as well.
Yes, that's right, yes.
Michael, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you very much, Sam. I'm delighted to be here and to talk as much as you like, yeah.
So you've a very interesting background, looking through it there. A lot of money in the projects that you've been through as well, So you started out as an architect.
Yes.
That's what you studied in, then some stuff in project management, and now here at DAA International, so airport management, stuff like that. Can you just bring me through that process and how you go from something very technical in towards leadership roles?
Yeah, well, I think you get all types of people, obviously, in business and in life. So the area that I'd be most interested in is sort of imagining the next thing. And I would have been as a kid into Lego and all of this kind of thing. So that got me into architecture, building, creating, imagining. And the architecture piece then worked as a regular architect for a long time, but then joined a company called Jacobs Engineering. Jacobs Engineering would be a big multinational engineering office, I suppose, all over the world. There was about 15,000 people in it when I joined it. It's a US company, and it really focuses on anything from NASA to industry to airports to other pieces of major constructions. So with that, joining Jacobs, actually, I ended up being the manager of the architectural department in Jacobs for Ireland. So there were about 50 people in the department, and we got the opportunity, I suppose, to bid for Cork Airport for a design to completely renew the airport. So it involved a brand new terminal and all new infrastructure around the airport entrance roads. There was about 15 buildings in the project and landscaping, all of the rest of it. So with that, got involved, I suppose, in airports for the first time. So having managed the architecture department in Jacobs and being, I suppose, behaving like a regular architect, maybe in an engineering firm, but part of a team, which was important as well, a sort of multidiscipline team, said, well, I'd like to do the airport. And so somebody else can manage the department and I'll focus on this. So a team of us got together, worked from 2001 to 2006, completely renewing Cork Airport. And I suppose the piece that anybody who knows the airport will know the new terminal. So I would have been lead architect for that, running the team there. And that's how I got to know the airport business, the airport people. And at the time, it was called Air Rianta. And there was an act passed then by the government, just to sort of say the Airports Act, which sort of split up Shannon, Dublin, Cork as Dublin Airport, Cork Airport, Shannon, independent, to sort of operate independently under the governance of a group called DAA, Dublin Airport Authority, which is really used to be Air Rianta, but it still runs Cork Airport, even though it's got Dublin in the title. So all of that happened. So our client sort of changed a little bit at that time. Working through and delivering Cork Airport in 2006, and it was a really interesting project because September 11th happened after we designed, but before we finished the construction. So all the changes and stuff had to be incorporated in the thing. So it was a very interesting journey. Went on to do many other things after that, and just in terms of, I suppose, being an architect, you get involved in so many different things. So did biopharma with Elan, did a factory for Dell, lots of stuff in Intel, pubs, houses, so you do all this kind of thing, but it's ultimately the same the way you think about things. It's a problem solving thing. The person has a problem, they need a structure to do whatever, and you figure it out. So that's just been interesting. So when Terminal 2 in Dublin came along, then I got a phone call from the airport to say, from DAA, from the people who used to be my client, and said, will you jump over and help us with this? Which I did. We worked on Terminal 2, so I was a project manager for the architectural side of Terminal 2. So most people will probably know Terminal 2 at Dublin Airport. And when we came off the end of that, it was really the concept and the idea that there's something in DAA that's more than just construction. There's something that's more about the operations piece for it. We had been doing some work out of the architectural and engineering part of DAA Group, just when we were coming off Terminal 2, doing bits and pieces of work that we were sort of exporting outside, but it was really consulting services in the construction industry, PM, project management, and all of these sort of bits and pieces. So we ended up doing lounges and things for Aer Lingus in London and Boston, New York, and all of this. So we were now exporting a little bit of service out of the business. And there were three of us at the time, myself, a guy called Kevin, another chap, Colin. And the three of us together sort of cooked up an idea about, there's a business in this that could be exported, will allow us to keep the knowledge within the company of DAA, but also so make some money for DAA as such, but also allow people to exercise their brains, because we're not going to be doing another terminal for a while. But many of this expertise that we have in the organization could be unlocked through something like DAA International. So that's the story of how it came about. Then really was that a board paper was put together 2013. Funny story in some respects, in that we went to the June 2013 board with we actually got PwC to help us actually do the board paper, and it went to the June 2013 board to present the paper. Came out unapproved with sort of 3 unanswered questions from the board, but we had unfortunately set up the American Association of Airport Executives to come to Dublin to the Herbert Park Hotel for the launch of the new company, which hadn't been approved by the board. So well, just to finish really, just on that's how it actually happened. So the only thing we could do is heads down, keep going. Leo Varadkar was Minister for Transport at the time. He came out, we went ahead with the launch of the company without the board approval. And he cut the ribbon. It was on TV3 News. The whole thing was there. And next thing, we went to the July board and it was approved. And that's how the business started. So it kind of didn't get approved. It kind of got quasi-approval, but it got approved once the Minister for Transport cut the ribbon. And congratulations on the new company.
I suppose there was nothing they could do with that.
Nothing we could do. And just to put that in context, the way it works is the Ministry of Transport holds the 100% shares of DAA Group. So there's no other shareholder. So the Minister holds on behalf of the government the shares. So that puts the Minister in charge of Cork Airport, Dublin Airport, DAA International, and the fourth part of our business, which is Aerienta International, or we call it ARI now. It's branded as ARI now, which is all the duty-free around the world. And just an interesting fact around that, duty-free was invented in Ireland, and that's why the duty-free is very close into the DNA, and the commercial side of it is very close in the DNA of DAA.
So talking about the DNA of the DAA, what is the international side of it? I suppose you're talking about consulting and the strategies of airport. How does that look, and also what are the goals of this company?
Yeah. So what we've discovered, I suppose we're 10 years in business now. So, and we're nearly 300 employees. So that was from 3 to 300 in about a decade. So that's pretty good. We're very, very happy with that. In fact, we could probably do more than we do, to be honest. But the idea really of the business is to unlock the talent that's in the DAA group and allow other airports to use it. And the business plan was really based on, we have this talent. We are government owned, which people really like, because that's an endorsement there that you can't really get easily. And we go to other governments and say, hey, this is DAA. It's owned by the government 100%. It doesn't cost any money. In fact, the shareholder gets a dividend back. That's, in other words, we pay money back. The profit at the end of the year, there's a shareholder dividend goes back to the government, not every year, because we try to reinvest it. But the concept of it is that you can have a national airport or airport system that costs nothing and in fact can actually make you money. And that's a model that we would try to sell to other governments, what we call airport owners. So they're investors or governments really around the world. And so our business model was based on that. But what we actually like to do to make money for ourselves is we do what we call a sort of an advanced advisory service, in that we call it a management contract. So we won't just tell you what you should be doing with your airport. We'll actually roll up the sleeves, get in there and do it with you. So we'll go on site for a couple of years with you and work our sort of magic as to how we do it in Ireland. Like, you hear all the ins and outs about Dublin Airport, but ultimately in the aviation space, it's like a model for how you would like to run your airports business in any country, So we sell the model in that respect. So the business is really in 3 pieces. It's advisory services, management contract, and then the third piece really is investment. And in the past, DAA has invested, but never in a sort of a formal kind of strategic kind of way. because it had at one point it owned up to 40% of a share in Birmingham Airport, but sold the share to build T2. That's a great story. So we owned the Great Southern Hotel chain, which Irish Rail didn't want, but gave it to DAA. It was interesting because when you take on a hotel chain, you get all this customer service know-how into your group, which is also a thing for the, and so that know-how came in, and that the value of that was that was the hotel chain was actually sold as well. So in very rough terms, you'd have sort of 300-400 million for your Birmingham, another 150 or more for the hotel chain. Sold all that, spent roughly 750 on the new Terminal 2, but you only needed to borrow 200. That story is brilliant. So we have a mortgage for only 200, so and that's their very rough figures. Don't quote me, please. I know, but don't quote. They're not official figures, but just they give you the idea of it.
Yeah.
That story, when we went around and started saying this, we're open for business. 3 of us going around saying we're open for business. This is how we run our business. We want a bit of that. They said, okay, we'd like to hire you. We said, okay, management contract. We put a team in with you for 4 or 5 years of people who've done this at home, but they'll now go and live in your place and do it with you in your airports. And just to finish on that would be what we've discovered is that the advisory services gets you a relationship, and then you get to talk to the people and you get to tell your story. You want to get this management contract, and we had got some very, very successful management contracts, very lucrative for the company, but then they expire. So what we've discovered is we start becoming the investment vehicle for DAA, other than sort of the investments I just talked about. They have at the moment 20% at Dusseldorf and 11% in Cyprus, in the 2 airports in Cyprus. So all these investments are out there for DAA Group, but not in DAA International.
Yes.
But if we become the investment vehicle, we can make the management contract continue forever. So the idea is one gets you in, that's your core business, and the investment makes sure the core business repeats. And it's that simple, to be honest. That's the whole business.
Make it sound very easy, I suppose. Just some of the projects that you guys have been, involved with over in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, the Red Sea International Airport. How does culture impact? Like, obviously, you're going in and showing them the Dublin model.
Yeah.
Is there much of a, many pain points there, or a hard learning curve for those people, or are they very welcoming to this particular way of doing it, or do you have to kind of change the scope of how you, I suppose, give your solution?
Well, it's just interesting you should ask that, because our first project was in Saudi Arabia. PwC helped us to write the business plan, and as soon as we got through all that stuff with the launch that we mentioned earlier on, as soon as we got through all of that, PwC then hired us to help them in Saudi Arabia to corporatize the airports of Saudi Arabia, because they'd been saying to the government in Saudi Arabia that you need to get sort of private investment, but you also need to get private sort of know-how into the airport system. They have 27 airports there. Saudi Arabia is 3 times bigger than France. Like, most of Europe, in fact, fits inside. It's a huge place, and best way to get around is fly, because there's no, like, the roads are just it's too long. So it's pretty huge. So that's how we built the relationships with the local airports, particularly Riyadh, and the relationships, when you're talking about, the culture and the relationships there. What we've discovered, I suppose, is that the Saudi psyche and the Irish psyche, very similar. It's family-based. They got a kind of a roguish sense of humor, religiously and all of that. It's very similar to the way we would have been in the 50s, sort of thing, but moving very, very fast in terms of change. The change in 10 years out there. So when we went out with our little laptop and our PowerPoint presentation saying, hey, we're open for business, to where we are now, the change culturally out there is just huge. It's just, there's a new generation out there. And I think that, to be fair, is due to digital. It's just where, the digital has opened up avenues all over the place for the population, I suppose, in Saudi, and just things are changing there. So we get on very well with the Saudi people. Huge, like a lot of a good example might be when we got to run Terminal 5, which is a 5-year contract. After 2 years in business and building up these relationships, we got this 5-year contract. It was in the order of 58 million altogether, 48 base, and a sort of a 10 million kitty for good, doing your key performance indicators, KPIs. And we got most of it by the end of 5 years. But there's a girl, Sarah, who works with us. Like, she went out, put on the abaya, went in there, first woman ever to work inside the airport. So now there are hundreds in 10 years, but she did it first. So that's a piece of history, and it's an Irish lady who did it. Yeah. And she's with us now. She was with us yesterday in the meetings that we were just talking about earlier. So so it's culturally, it's working out. We have work in the Philippines. Again, culturally works very well. Nice people, lovely people, family type people, all of that. We have work in Australia, which would be very sort of straight talk, Yeah, but it works okay for us. Like what we're doing in Australia is we're helping the Australian government to do a purchase of 100 new fire tenders for the whole of Australia. 100 new fire tenders to spread over all the major airports in Australia. And but that's a very sort of governance led, step by step, gateway approach, got through, and we're helping them because we would do that ourselves back at home in the DAA. And then we have stuff in America as well, and the Irish America thing doesn't do us any harm either. So that's true. So it's all good. Yeah. Culturally, we don't have a problem, but there is a natural Irish sort of gift of the gab or whatever you want to call it that works, and you're kind of accepted everywhere you go. Yeah.
You mentioned digital there earlier. So in terms of the future of how airports are going to look, obviously their greatest invention is duty free. But how do we see airport management and just airports in general evolving, using new technologies like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, stuff like that?
But it is a worry. If you're looking like future, there's kind of a worry that airports at the moment, and particularly government owned and some investor fund led, owned airports, is that they think they're pieces of infrastructure. And we're saying in DAA International, well, we're an airport operator. We don't necessarily have to own the infrastructure, and we may not even need all the infrastructure that you see out there. So there's a sort of an argument in the future. The digital transformation allows the operator to provide a much greater service to the customer. But the customer, there's a small thing just about the customer. Is our customer the airline, or is our customer the passenger going through? Because the passenger is really the airline's customer. We're the custodian of their customer, you know what I mean? Yeah. For a period of time on the journey, which is from, office to office or home to holiday or whatever it is. And as we sort of, what we need to do in airport operations is kind of rise ourselves above the geographic boundaries of the airport and say, we're an operator here, so we can actually go beyond, say in the case of Dublin Airport, the roundabout that you enter Dublin Airport. Let's not be restricted by that. Let's go get the passenger from the house, get the passenger from the office. So the digital piece allows us to do that. And what we're seeing in industry now is that there are people looking with technology, helping with bag tracking and all of this kind of thing, bag collection, all of that type of stuff, and taxi service, all of these pieces. I'm saying if we're the operator, we need to get on board with getting involved with the passenger much earlier in the journey, because if we don't, somebody else will. And if we're not careful, we end up just being a sort of a manager of a piece of infrastructure. And we have a concept in DAA International called virtual terminal. So virtual terminal would be where it's really a sort of an exercise that you do, a sort of maybe an academic in some ways, and you say, let's look at all the things that are going on in an airport terminal, and let's see how many of these we can do digitally. And you can inevitably find that practically everything that's in the terminal can be done digitally, even the security screening. There's enough I suppose, digital power, I suppose, out there to actually do all that screening, security and whatever, not in the airport. Why does it have to be done physically in the airport? Well, usually the answer is because it kind of suits the airport. It doesn't suit the passenger. Yeah. So we need to change the mindset and say airport operations is a concierge service to passengers. So once we change that mindset, we can start looking beyond the boundaries of the airport and start taking the passenger on a looking after the passenger much better on their journey and making it a lot easier. And the worry is if you don't do that, somebody else will take that space, and we as airport operators could just end up sweeping a runway because that's all there's left to do. Why? Because the passenger through technology is walking straight to the plane and doesn't need to go through the terminal, because they can book online, they can get the taxi online. Buying the coffee they could have done, but they didn't have to go to the terminal. They could have got that on the way. Yeah. All of these pieces. So, and the screening, particularly in the Irish case, in Dublin Airport's case, where we run our own airport police, technically, I suppose we can screen somebody in Kerry and drive them straight to the plane. They don't have to the screening doesn't have to happen in a situation. That's old-fashioned thinking. but you can screen them somewhere once they're what they call a clean passenger, and the bag is a clean bag getting to the aircraft. You can do it anywhere. So things like in the case of Dublin Airport, you could say, we're waiting for Metro to come to Dublin Airport. But why wait for Metro? Go get the passenger yourself.
Yeah.
Don't wait for them to build. That's going to take 10 years, well, longer.
So I suppose that concept of the virtual airport, you're almost looking to just take away what is usually a stressful environment, I suppose, for a passenger. Yeah.
For sure. It's a concierge service. And digitally, of course, you can tweak it. Sort of say, well, actually, there's various versions of it, I suppose, in that, what do you need now? So let's say if you pick up your passenger somewhere not at the airport, but outside the airport, one could be Hawkins Street in town, let's say, where the Metro, the Liffey, and all the buses all stop. You pick your passenger up there, screen them on the way to the airport, and bring them straight to aircraft, not through the terminal. Let's say a school trip. What teacher's not going to thank you for having all the passengers going straight to the steps of the aircraft and not having to round them up through the terminal and all the rest? Golf trips, all of that kind of stuff. Or you can, even with our sort of cap that we have at the moment, pick up our passengers in the various shopping centres around and do the paid parking in the shopping centre for cheaper than the airport, but share the cost, share the spoils of it with, these sort of concepts. Once you say, I don't have to work inside this geographic space, you can bring these concepts into the greater space. And you're saying, well, 32 million, like the 32 million passengers is because of traffic.
Yeah.
Well, they're all on a bus. There's 80 of them on a bus. So that's a whole different, so now where's your problem? So these sort of things are where digital can help us, but it can also, to your point about how does it make the journey better? Like the school teacher's going to thank you. Maybe the shopping piece is that's going to be much more convenient, a place to pick up. And the passenger, as you say, going through an airport can be stressful. There's a whole map, of course, of psychology going through the airport. And even when you get to the retail on the far side, what's the passenger going to want first? Oh, drink of water.
Yeah.
What do we want to sell them first? Perfume. So pharmacy, then there's the fuzzy hat just before you go down to the gate. And you'll see there's actually, it's all thought out, what are you hitting them with as you go through? But for the passenger, if you go virtual and you go outside the boundaries of the airport, as soon as they step on whatever vehicle or wherever you're picking them up, they've made their flight. And for the airport, they've made their flight, they're coming or whatever. Just reversing a little bit back from that, if you look at, we were talking about the parts of the journey. I think we've worked it out. It's maybe not time to go through it all here now, but it's about 18 touch points that you're asking your granny to do going through the airport. And it's not kind of fair. And there's no reason you need to do it because a lot of these could be handled digitally and seamlessly and digitally. So you would really, you'd want to, give this as a service, make this a service for which you can actually put a little bit more money on the ticket, to pay for this. And the other side of it is if you are putting more passengers through in less physical space, then you're not spending 750 million or whatever building a new terminal. You don't have to build as big a one or maybe none at all, which means that you maybe don't need to do all the retailing that you do because that's to make up for the mortgage. And, and ultimately you should be more profitable.
I mean, that's just an amazing way of just looking at that issue in terms of taking it away from the actual airport itself and how wide you've almost moved your services. Looking more so your customer can be the airport most of the time. Looking at virtual airports, how does that help the actual infrastructure of the airport? What can you bring in to kind of make that a more profitable experience, I suppose, for the airport and maybe, better use of resources?
We did the virtual terminal exercise. It's a workshop thing that we do. We've done it in various places, which is just empty the terminal and fill it up digitally. So you can't build it.
Yeah.
And we did it with Frankfurt, and Frankfurt brought in their SVPs and operations into a room, and we just did a session during the day. And so, what's your problem? The problem is that we make €2.19 or whatever per passenger on the retail, and we should be making 7. And why is that? Oh, because they don't know where their gate is. They spent too long in security queue. There's a second batch of security that's we don't have in Ireland, but they sort of put them in these isolated lounges to wait for the plane. So all they do is sit there on their iPhones for 45 minutes before the flight boards. So all of that can be handled digitally. So you can take all that out by, first of all, increasing your throughput on security and screening, which is all about using digital technology for queue management and all of that kind of thing. But one of the things that we sort of concluded in this particular one was that, so their problem they had was, apart from the 219, so if as soon as you speed up any part of that process, the €2.19 becomes 3.50, becomes whatever, all the way along in terms of revenues. That's in your traditional airport where you're assuming you need to get that money in because you haven't done it virtually, but that's a whole other, So, but the thing that came out of that one was, so we have the Frankfurt Motor Show, every 2 years, and we get 30 to 40,000 extra passengers on any given day over that period of 10 days when the show is on. And we concluded, so don't, and the airport is just mayhem. And I'm kind of saying, well, would you not plan for that? But whatever reason, anyway, they say that becomes a problem every year. They kind of know it's going to happen, and it still becomes a problem. So go collect them at the motor show.
Yeah.
And put €50 on the ticket, but the people at the motor show will be happy. The passengers will pay the 50 quid not to do all the hoo-ha and bring them straight to the relevant aircrafts. So, and screen them on the way.
Yeah. And so when you say straight to the aircraft, is there still that thing of you're in the duty free at some point, or is it
no,
really
you can do that virtually. You got a ticket, you're entitled to duty free, just get it delivered to your house. Okay. Yeah. I mean, why do you want to carry it all around the place anyway? Yeah. So
it really is just completely taking everything away from the physical space. Yeah.
You can actually demonstrate that you don't need a terminal. I mean, you can demonstrate it. It's like practicalities, but there's the virtual terminal concept works in the case of Fraport, where you can actually manage without having to physically build anything, or you can manage the peaks.
Yeah.
For the Frankfurt Motor Show, whatever. So it gets them over that, but no worries. Just going to collect them at the show, business as usual up at the airport. So we're not, so it's the regular rosters and all of this kind of thing at the airport. So it's nothing special. You can also use it. There's a project that we're looking at in Saudi Arabia in Jubail, where it's a Navy airfield that they want to make into a regular airport. And they go to the market and they say, build an airport for 1 million passengers. What's the highest bidder to build an airport for 1 million passengers here? And everybody's going, well, that's fine. You're saying 1 million passengers. Where are the passengers? Yeah. How do you know they're there? Because the lending institution that's going to give us the loan to actually invest in this is saying that business model doesn't work because there's a risk that the passengers won't come. So will you give us a guarantee that if the passengers don't come, that you'll actually pay us? Because we ended up building this terminal and investing all this money in it. He said, well, don't build the terminal, just do virtual. Just run an airport without building the terminal. And when it reaches a critical mass, then you've proven your business case, and you can actually, maybe then it's worthwhile investing in a terminal, a more traditional terminal. I suppose, so it's the peaks, the troughs where there isn't a terminal, you can prove a business case using virtual terminal, or you can just go pure virtual.
So are we saying we can boil it down to as simple as runway and a plane?
Yeah.
And that's it.
Because the thing that's always been it's interesting. If we do the workshop, we look at, well, why do we even have the terminals we have? We start at the beginning and say, well, it used to be just an airfield.
Yeah.
And then it sort of became, I'm talking about, this is like post-World War I, 1921, 22, was actually between Russia, Prussia. They had to, they were doing a sort of a cross-a-border flights. And you see, when it's military, it doesn't matter, but when it's civilian, it matters, like passports and all that. So they had a control tower, but they had to then put a passport control thing at the bottom of the control tower. And then there was people sort of, next in the post office wanted to use planes, airmail, So now you had a post office, a passport thing. And so terminals just sort of evolved and then regular passengers had to wait for the planes, so they need a lounge, and everything just sort of escalated, between the wars. The concept of a terminal being a sort of a building in which people spend time, maybe buy a newspaper and all that, only evolved in those sort of 20, 30 years. Yeah. And by the end of World War II, when travel started coming back again, it was sort of, well, isn't this the only way you do it? So they evolved, and then digital now allows us to sort of rethink it and bring it back to, to the core principles, because all of those activities that you used to have to physically construct for, you can now do digitally, including security.
And so thinking about the control tower, you mentioned that there, can that be done virtually or kind of,
yes,
from offsite?
Yeah, the Irish Aviation Authority is looking at it. We see it in Saudi. We've actually an airport in Red Sea in Saudi, brand new airport built from scratch. We're running it for 10 years now.
It's just,
I don't know if you've seen it. Yeah, if you've seen pictures. Yeah, it's worth looking up. Red Sea Global, if anybody wants to have a look at it. The whole resort is just unbelievable. And it's one of these Saudi mega projects or giga projects. So they have a virtual terminal there. So they didn't, virtual tower, I should say. But also there's some interesting things for us in that we're building a terminal that has no baggage reclaim belts. There's nowhere to claim your bag. Why is that? Because we as the operator will bring the bag to the destination. So when you arrive, the planes arrive in, we take the bags off the plane, send them off to your hotel or whatever. And you just come in and just get in a vehicle and go to the hotel. When you get there, bags are there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I suppose if the customer doesn't want to avail of that, what's the solution in that case?
It's the exception, but there's a small area where that will be it's basically manually handled at that stage. But the selling point at the terminal of the airport is that we look after all that. So we're discouraging anybody from doing but it's allowing us in DAA to experiment over there with something that could be a bigger thing internationally and certainly back home in Dublin.
And on the virtual control center, I suppose, how is that working? Are you getting some sort of digital twin, a bit of a simulation of what that field looks like?
There's a core center, let's say in Jeddah, or wherever it's going to be. Presumably in Dublin, it'll be the control tower Dublin, and it's all done by camera. So the runway is literally looked at from all angles. And I'm not sure of all the technology behind it, but it's effectively done at a distance and centralized at one point. And to an extent, I mean, it does say that, you don't necessarily need control towers as you used to anymore. But I think it'll be, as they say with all this stuff, and even they're saying with AI, there still needs to be that human piece in there at the end. So you probably still want a window you can look out at some of the major areas just to be on the safe side rather than leaving everything to sort of, digital.
Yeah.
In time, that'll probably change. But right now,
so a lot of these solutions, like, they're obviously very digital heavy, a lot of data processing involved. Just on the sustainability side of this, is there kind of safeguards to counteract, the level of infrastructure and data processing required here? I think the Red Sea is
it's a regenerative tourism.
Is 100% solar powered, I believe, as well.
Yeah, the airport is 100%. It's 100% renewable, I should say. Yeah. And all waste then is recycled. The sustainability in terms of power for the infrastructure, Red Sea will be a great example of that. Yeah, it's opening properly for business towards the end later this year, mid to the end of this year. But the other side of it then is Red Sea would have what they call SAF, which is sustainable aviation fuel. That's the big word at the moment in aviation, SAF, which is a sort of a biofuel as opposed to it's a renewable fuel that aircraft can use. So that's been looked at as is the sort of biodiesels and stuff for the fire trucks and all of that. So those areas definitely being looked at. I think, again, if you look at virtual, you can say, okay, I don't have to build, less concrete, less material, less obviously operating costs and energy related to that. So there's definitely a sustainability thing in there. The one thing I would say, though, looking forward, and this is something we were saying, say, in our work in Saudi, would be Saudi Rail, Saudi Arabian Rail, SAR. They are putting in the high-speed trains. In fact, we run the airport, the whole of Jeddah Airport. We have a team out there doing a management contract, 5 years, and when we leave, you do it yourself sort of thing. And there's a six platform high-speed train station in the airport that we're running. So it's more sophisticated than Heathrow. The terminal itself is nearly twice the size of Heathrow Terminal 5. It's the second biggest terminal on the planet, and nobody really knows it, but DAA International is running it.
Yeah.
We've 42 people on site working all the management positions, running the entire airport. Airport's 100 square kilometres. Compares with Dublin, which is about 10.2. So it's about 10 times the size. Yeah, so it's really huge. But the thing there is that the rail will start becoming environmentally better than air travel in a place like Saudi. Over time.
Yeah.
The States will be the same. Like, they're looking at investing more in airports, but rail will become that. It's the competitor for us in the future in airports, in the aviation business. Yeah, domestic and European. But you can see it in Europe already.
Yeah.
And you can see, though, but the environmental or sustainability piece of rail, more passengers, less fuel.
Exactly. Yeah. So just looking at the kind of what the DAA International is and the type of work you do, for a student here, say in DCU, what are the type of skills that you're looking for when you're hiring, say, a graduate going into that position?
Well, variety is the first thing. Yeah, we've got a huge group. Bilal, who's with us here, fantastic. Like, you know, bringing us into the digital age with the just in 6 weeks, just prior to and after Christmas, we were doing virtual reality in a very interesting scenario there where we in Red Sea where the terminal is not finished, but we have a contractual obligation to kick off an operational readiness program. And we're sort of saying, terminal is not finished construction yet. How can we do it? Yeah. And Bilal comes up with the idea of, well, let's VR it, you know, virtual reality. So that's happening right now. Fantastic. So that was a brilliant piece that was brought. So, but we have everything in our team from chemists to accountants to architects, good few engineers, a lot of business people, people who study politics, archaeology. All of these linguistics graduates is probably one of our elder members as well. Graduated UCD in linguistics, communication, you know, all of that. So what we look for is not necessarily what you're studying, but the type of person that you are. And we need an innovative type person who doesn't say no for an answer and will sort of roll up their sleeves and put their hand to whatever needs to be done. That's a little bit of the ethos of when there was 3 of us and we had to be all things to all people. And we want to try and keep that culture and ethos in the DAA International team. And the idea, of course, is that filters back into the DAA organization as well. So, you know, there's a cultural move or shift there. Yeah. So when we're looking for somebody, it's not so much what you study, it's are you a DAA International kind of person, which is a can-do, sort of, you know, bit of initiative and smart, and obviously prepared to travel. It has to be,
I suppose on the flip side then, as a student, why should I want to go to DAA, I suppose?
See the world. It's one way of doing it. Yeah. I mean, anybody who's with us has traveled. Like, you know, Rachel is a graduate with us. She spent weeks in the Philippines swimming with the sharks and doing all this kind of thing. It's just stunning. Like, you know, the doors that open. And also, aviation, believe it or not, is a very small world. And everybody seems to know everybody, and they do talk to each other a lot. So you will build a network, an unbelievable network, international network, from Australia to the US to, as I say, Philippines to where we were working recently in Uzbekistan to, you know, all of these. You just build up literally contacts in all of these places, and then within the consulting firms and that we say we do advisory, but we're not really competing with the consultancy firms like Arabs and all of that. Although we would have the same skill sets, we only do it to build a relationship. Yeah. So it's not we're not competing there, but you build a network within these firms as well. And those firms ask us to help them. And like we said, PwC brought us in. We bring PwC in on other things, and likewise with the other big consulting firms.
So for people that are interested in a career, obviously you've kind of come from an architect background, you've done project management, you've been involved in all sorts of industries and stuff like that. So people are interested in more physical infrastructure, but also with a bit of business sense. What would your advice be to them on how to go about their getting into that career?
So not just airports.
Yeah, just in general, like that real interest in just how things work, I suppose, as you said earlier.
Yeah, well, I mean, the future is facilities management, really, in that space, and and what's behind that is data and AI. You know, how to sustain, like infrastructure is a story in that you start with nothing, you build something, you look after it, and then you bury it. You know, it's a life. So there's a thing called ISO 55001. Interestingly enough, DAA Dublin Airport was the first airport in the world to actually have that, which is the sort of cradle to grave asset care. So facilities management, asset care is a huge area, and it takes up everybody from accounting to engineering to quantity surveying to, you know, all the various disciplines would actually be in that space. But it's, I suppose, one of our phrases is build less physically, build more virtually. Is a phrase that we would have in DAA International. And so if you're looking for a career in infrastructure, I'm still saying build less physically, build more virtually, but try and sustain what you have physically is probably the thing. And reuse, you know, recycle, reuse, all of that. Again, if you looked at our virtual terminal thing, you say, okay, I'm emptying the terminals. What am I going to do with them? Like, you know, because they're still going to be there. It's something to sustain.
So just as a final question, so in second year of digital business innovation degree I'm studying, we had a module called failure, and it was taught by Brian Harney, who is a Spurs fan, and that means he's a specialist in failure. Obviously, I don't think it might be saying that. So you've had a very successful career, obviously. Can you talk about maybe an instance or a time where you failed or something has went wrong, and how you deal with failure to grow.
Jakers, it's a hard one, a bit glass half full, as you can probably tell.
Yeah.
So generally, things that fail, you try and look on the bright side, and sort of say, well, okay, situations without being too specific. We did one recently last year where we prepared a huge proposal for a huge project in the Middle East, massive revenues over 10 years. We double the size of our business overnight, but we couldn't get it through all the permits and permissions of governance all the way through to sort of, from there's various, gateways boards and other boards and ministries and all of this. So we couldn't get it to the far end. And yet we had the whole thing complete, ready to go. And you could sit back and sort of say, God, we worked for probably 5 years when we sort of saw the idea, built a relationship, got invited to bid, put the bid together, spent quite a lot of money putting the bid together. And then at the last pip to the post, 1 week before, sorry, we don't like it, you can't submit it. So what do you do with that? You have to look at the bright side and say, well, what we do is certainly we put about what we've actually put in our bid. We actually have the people on the other side who invited us to bid are going, oh, you didn't bid, and we have to do. So we're saying, well, we actually might as well share the ideas with you anyway, because we can't do it because we can't bid unless you can think of another way other than your bidding procedure to actually hire us. Because here's our problems. But look at the bright side, and I say never. Like failures, I don't know. You try and turn them into something positive, or you look at what bits of it can you sort of rescue and move on. So in that case, we're still talking to the guys who haven't appointed anybody for that project. We didn't bid, and they're clearly saying, well, we'd like you.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out something else. So it's not quite a failure in that respect. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but how to deal with it is like move on, but take the best bits out of it.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, that's all my questions for today. So listen, I don't think I'd ever thought of quite how you're looking at that virtual airport. Just the thought of me parking in I don't know, Jervis Street and getting picked up straight to
or from your house eventually. Yeah.
I mean, that's just, it's amazing to think about, how easy you can make that journey for people. So listen, thank you very much for your time. It's been a real honor to have you in here.
Thanks very much, Sam. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you.